Welcome to Nightmares on Film's review of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. In this first part out of a series of 4, we'll briefly summarize the film's plot and examine its conception and pre-production. We'll drop some timestamps in the description so you can jump straight to the part you're interested in. At Nightmares on Film, we explore the history of scary cinema, looking at classic films to see how they were made, why they're interesting or important, and most of all, how scary they are. If you haven't seen the film before, don't worry, we'll try not to mention any big spoilers. Check out our website at www.nightmaresonfilm.com for lots more reviews and other surprises too. Do you ever feel like you don't have control over your life? Like someone else is pulling your strings? This happens to Cesare in The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. This sleepwalker finds himself controlled by a mad scientist who uses him to work his own nefarious schemes. This earliest true horror film set a high water mark for all later scary films to reach for. Two men are sitting on a park bench discussing their lot in life. A forlorn-looking woman passes by, and the younger man, Francis, explains to the older man that she is his fiancée. Francis is certain his own experiences have been more shocking than anything the other man has been through, and begins telling his tale. In his hometown of Holstonwall, the annual fair is taking place. Francis's best friend, Alan, convinces him to attend the fair. Meanwhile, at the town clerk's office, an older man calling himself Dr. Caligari is trying to get a permit to set up a sideshow act at the fair. The town clerk is much too busy to talk to Caligari, passing him off to another worker. Caligari seems none too pleased. Later, at the fair, Caligari unveils his sideshow attraction, a somnambulist, sleepwalker, named Cesare. The following morning, the town clerk is found dead in his own bed, apparently murdered by stabbing during the night. Alan and Francis arrive at the fair, where against Francis's better judgment, Alan drags him into the tent of Dr. Caligari to witness the somnambulist. Cesare stands unconscious in a wooden cabinet until called upon by the doctor, after which he opens his eyes. Caligari then announces that Cesare will offer fortune-telling to the audience members. Alan rushes forward to ask the somnambulist how long he will live. Cesare replies grimly, "Till the break of dawn." What? He's going to die in less than 24 hours? Alan is flabbergasted. On the way home, they meet up with Jane, who they are both romantically interested in. After a short time, they go their separate ways. Just as the somnambulist predicted, in the night, Alan is murdered by a knife-wielding killer while he lay in bed. We aren't sure exactly who it was, because we only see the murderer's shadow on the wall. When Francis hears of his friend's fate, he is disconsolate. Remembering Cesare's prediction at the fair, Francis notifies the police and resolves to get to the bottom of the mystery. That night, the police catch a man attempting to stab a woman with a long knife. Could this be the man responsible for the recent murders? It turns out this man intentionally mimicked the MO of the two other murders when plotting his own crime. However, he swears he had nothing to do with those two first killings. If that's true, then there's still a deadly criminal on the loose. Slowly it dawns on Francis that Dr. Caligari must be more than just an innocent sideshow barker. What is the doctor's sinister secret? Is Cesare the somnambulist a totally benign carnival attraction? While attempting to solve these riddles, Francis and Jane become tangled in a web of deceit and murder as they uncover the truth about the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. In the first years of the 20th century, the upstart German Empire had a high opinion of itself. It was industrializing rapidly and desperate to compete economically, politically, and militarily on the world stage. But there was also another current stirring the waters. 3 towering figures steered the philosophical bent of the German people around the turn of the century. The composer Richard Wagner rebelled against what he considered the decadent music common during his time. He devised a type of musical drama called the Gesamtkunstwerk, total work of art. This combined music, drama, theatricality, and sometimes dance into a whole greater than the sum of its parts. Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche was a friend to Wagner in his early career before a serious falling out between the two men. Nietzsche developed the notion of perspectivism, the view that objective truth was unobtainable. Therefore, he concluded that traditional ways of looking at reality were obsolete. The father of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud, postulated that there were hidden worlds within the human mind where subconscious forces sometimes compel us towards actions our conscious mind would never endorse. The German spirit, then, was a combination of a will to power and a disregard for traditional structure and authority in pursuit of a romantic rebirth and a liberation of the forces within. This uncontrolled momentum led the German Empire to become involved in the Great War from 1914 to 1918, a disastrous conflict which Germany lost. After the war, chaos reigned in the streets as groups vied for control. All had to suffer under the draconian punishments imposed by the victorious nations. Among those discontented at their country's fortunes were two former soldiers. Hans Janowitz and Karl Mayr were introduced to one another by a mutual friend. Both men had become pacifists because of their wartime experiences. Janowitz served as an officer in the war, but was bitter about what he considered the authoritative power of an inhuman state gone mad. Mayr had pretended to be insane to avoid fighting. Instead of facing combat, he faced the intense scrutiny of an authoritarian military psychiatrist, which wasn't much easier. Memories of this psychiatrist formed the basis for the Dr. Caligari character. Mayr's girlfriend thought he and Janowitz should collaborate on a movie screenplay. A visit to a circus sideshow in Berlin sealed the deal. There, the two men witnessed a spectacle called Man or Machine, featuring a hypnotized strongman. That night, their imaginations conjured up much of what would become the plot of the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Many other aspects of the story drew from experiences in the two men's lives. Janowitz believed he had witnessed a murder at a park in Hamburg called the Holstenwall. This inspired the name of the town in the film, Holstenwall, with similar misdeeds occurring there. An eerie prediction by a fortune teller that came true inspired the fortune-telling scene in the film. Mayr and Janowitz hammered out the script in about 6 weeks, partially inspired by the films of Paul Wegener, whom they both admired. Wegener had introduced audiences to a highly influential early movie monster in The Golem, 1915, and The Golem and the Dancing Girl, 1917. Both of these films are now partially lost. The Golem, How He Came Into the World, 1920, is extant, but came out after the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, thus was not a direct influence upon it. The Golem is a hulking guardian made of clay. With no mind of his own, he exists only to serve his master, a clear inspiration for the character Cesare in the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Debate persists as to whether or not Mayr and Janowitz intentionally set out to make an anti-authority movie. Some evidence suggests this, but it could also be that both men were just bitter towards the leaders who marched Germany to war, and these themes subconsciously made it into their script. They used the English word cabinet instead of the German Kabinett, probably for alliteration and perhaps to help the project to be more marketable internationally. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari features an early example of a frame story. The film's opening and closing take place in the present, but most of the film is actually a flashback. Some of it is even a flashback within a flashback. This non-linear storytelling was definitely unconventional at the time and adds to the surreal qualities of the picture. The original script featured a different frame story than the one in the final film. Debate rages as to whether the new one may have been inserted at the studio's behest in order to soften the anti-authoritarian message of the film. As it appears, it's certainly ambiguous and open for interpretation. In April 1919, they took their work to the head of Dracula Film, Erich Pommer, who wanted them to leave it with him. They insisted upon reading it for him on the spot. Palmer was so enthusiastic, he refused to let Meyer and Janowitz leave until they signed a contract. The sale price was 3,500 marks with potential for bonuses. Not a great sum even at that time. Palmer felt the script would be inexpensive to film, which was important in a Germany still reeling economically from the First World War. Interestingly, there was no mention in the original script of the wild expressionist visuals that would find their way into the final film. Expressionism was part of a wider avant-garde artistic movement across Europe around the turn of the century that signaled a rejection of realistic and naturalistic themes in favor of unrestrained, emotionally charged styles. In France, Cubism was one popular facet of this artistic revolution. Futurism, taking root mainly in Italy, was another. In Germany, the movement became known as Expressionism. Painters such as Wassily Kandinsky, Franz Marc, and Ludwig Kirchner are representative of the style. Dracula Film assigned director Robert Wien to the project and handed the art design of the film to the trio of Hermann Warm, Walter Reimann, and Walter Rohrig. These three were affiliated with the prominent expressionist art magazine Der Sturm, and Reimann was an accomplished expressionist painter. The three proceeded to imbue every aspect of the cabinet of Dr. Caligari with his eccentric visual style, a decision endorsed by director Wien. The abstract style also suited Dracula's limited funds, as realistic designs would have been more expensive and time-consuming to create. By this time, serious artists were already rejecting Expressionism in favor of new styles such as Dadaism and Surrealism that better represented the mentality of a generation devastated by apocalyptic conflict. Nevertheless, the Dracula execs saw an opportunity to capitalize on the widespread popularity of Expressionism in their film. They figured even if the story wasn't any good, the visuals would get people talking. Isn't that always the case? By the time the average person finds out about something, the cool kids have already moved on to something else. But wait, there's more. Click the link on your screen to be taken to the second part of this 4-part series, where we'll continue our discussion of the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari with a look at the making of the film, the cast, special effects, and music. You can help us celebrate scary cinema by liking and commenting on the video. If you like what you see so far, why not subscribe to the channel and tap the bell icon so you'll get notified whenever we release a new video. On our website, www.nightmaresonfilm.com, you'll find written versions of all our film reviews, including many not yet available on our YouTube channel. If you poke around in there, you may discover some other surprises too.